The ship docked at 0600. I turned my phone on before we even stopped moving. Force of habit. 9 months of reaching for it in the dark, checking the time difference, calculating whether Rowan would be awake. One message waiting. From him. Come straight home. I need to tell you something before you hear it from anyone else. Please. I read it 3 times. Please. In 9 months, across hundreds of messages, through frozen video calls and dropped connections and 3 in the morning conversations where one of us was always pretending to be less tired than we were, he had never written please. Not once. I put the phone in my pocket, picked up my bag, walked off the ship with everyone else, smiled at the right moments, said the right things, and felt something cold sitting quietly in my chest the entire time. My name is Alina Mercer. Petty Officer First Class, United States Navy. I had been deployed for 9 months aboard a guided missile destroyer in the Pacific. 9 months of 12-hour shifts and recycled air and photographs of home that I looked at so many times the edges went soft. 9 months of trusting my husband with everything. Our house. Our money. Our life. Our future. Rowan Hale was not a complicated man. That was what I loved about him first. He said what he meant. He did what he said. He never made me guess. In 7 years together, I had never once gone to sleep wondering where we stood. That was rarer than people understood. I knew that. I had never taken it for granted. Inside my backpack, wrapped in a spare sock, because I hadn't had anything better to put it in, was a small velvet box. Inside the box was a silver charm, shaped like a pacifier. Tiny. Lighter than it looked. 3 weeks before coming home, a Navy doctor had confirmed what I had suspected for longer than I wanted to admit. I was pregnant. Nobody knew. Not my unit. Not my commanding officer. Not my mother. Not Rowan. I had carried it alone across 8,000 miles of ocean because I had made myself a promise. I would tell him face to face. I would watch his eyes when he understood. I would be there for the exact moment it became real for him the way it had become real for me slowly, then all at once, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. I had imagined that moment so many times it had started to feel like a memory. His laugh first. Then the tears he would pretend weren't happening. Then his hands on my face. We're going to be parents. Today was supposed to be that day. The taxi driver talked about the weather. I said yes and no in the right places. Outside the window the city moved past like something I was watching through glass. Same streets. Same trees. Same coffee shop on the corner where Rowan and I had sat on our 3rd date and talked until they turned the chairs upside down on the tables around us. Everything exactly where I had left it. Except for the thing sitting cold and quiet in my chest. Please. I pressed my hand against my backpack. Felt the small hard shape of the box through the fabric. Nothing can ruin today. I almost believed it. The taxi stopped. Rowan was already outside. Not on the porch. Not by the door. In the driveway. Like he had been standing there waiting and couldn't make himself go back in. He saw me before I had fully stepped out. And he came straight to me. No hesitation. No performance. Just crossed the distance between us and pulled me in like he was closing a gap that had been hurting him for months. Which it had. I knew because it had been hurting me too. I missed you, he said into my hair. I missed you too. He didn't let go immediately. And I noticed his arms were too tight. Not the tight of excitement. The tight of someone holding on because they're afraid of what comes next. I pulled back just enough to see his face. He looked tired. Not the tired of someone who hadn't slept. The tired of someone who had been awake too long thinking about one thing. Rowan. Yeah. What's wrong? He looked at me for a long moment. The way he looked at me when he was choosing words carefully. Inside, he said. Tell me now. Alina, Rowan. Whatever it is, tell me now. He took a breath. Opened his mouth. And the front door opened. She was small. Smaller than I expected, though I hadn't been expecting anyone at all. For years old. Maybe less. Bare feet on the porch despite the cold. A crayon in her hand, blue, worn down to half its size. She looked at Rowan with the kind of trust that can't be performed. The kind that lives in the body. In the way a child leans toward someone without thinking about it. And she smiled. And she ran. both arms open. Straight to my husband. Daddy. Time didn't stop. That's what people say, but it isn't true. Time kept moving. The wind kept moving. A car passed slowly at the end of the street. Everything continued exactly as it had been. Except I had stopped. Somewhere between that word leaving her mouth and reaching me, I had simply stopped. Rowan caught her instinctively. The way you catch something you've caught 100 times before. Then his eyes found mine over the top of her head. And I saw it. Not guilt. Terror. The specific terror of a man watching the thing he had been dreading for months arrive all at once. Sweetheart. His voice came out gentle. Practiced. Can you go inside for a minute? She pulled back and looked at him. Then looked at me. Curious. Completely unafraid. Are you the Navy lady? My mouth wouldn't work. She nodded seriously, like she had confirmed it herself. Then held up her crayon. I'm saving the blue for you, she said. Daddy Rowan said blue is your favorite. Then she turned and ran back inside. The door swung shut behind her. Silence. Just Rowan. Just me. Just the cold space between us that hadn't been there 9 months ago. Who is she? Her name is Emerson. And why does she call you that? He didn't look away. I noticed that later, that through all of it, he never once looked away. Because I let her. 3 words. Not it just happened. Not I don't know how. A choice. He had made a choice. And he was standing in our driveway owning it. Start from the beginning, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. And don't protect me from any of it. He nodded. Okay. He sat on the porch steps. I stayed standing. Some part of me needed to be above this conversation until I understood it. Her mother's name is Ava Sutton, he began. She moved in next door about 6 months ago. Her and Emerson. Nobody else. Where's the father? Rowan looked at the ground. He died 8 months before they moved here. Navy. Same branch as you. Something shifted in my chest. I let it shift and kept listening. She kept to herself at first. I barely saw her. He turned the wedding ring on his finger, something he did when he was thinking. Then one night in January, past midnight, I heard something outside. What? A car engine. Running. Just sitting there. He looked up. I looked out the window. She was in her car. Both of them. Ava and Emerson. Why? Their water heater burst. Ground floor flooded. It was 31 degrees. I looked away. At the street. At the oak tree. At anything that wasn't his face for a moment. You brought them inside. Yes. Without telling me. The words landed in the space between us. He didn't defend it. Yes. How long did they stay? That night, 2 days. Then they went to a temporary place. He paused. The second time was March. Apartment needed emergency repairs. They had nowhere to go for the night. 2 nights total. Yes. In our house. Yes. I turned back to him. And the rest of it. He knew what I meant. I helped when things got bad. Groceries sometimes. School runs when Ava had back-to-back shifts at the hospital. He stopped. And money. How much? 4,000. Over 6 months. I closed my eyes. Not because the number was devastating. Because I hadn't known. Because I had been 8,000 miles away trusting him completely, and there had been this entire world operating inside our life that I knew nothing about. From our account? My personal savings. The account you don't use. Rowan. I know. That is not the point, and you know it. I know. He stood up. Not to argue. Just to face me at the same level. I kept telling myself I was protecting you. That you had enough to carry over there without worrying about something you couldn't control from that distance. That was not your decision. I know. I am not someone who needs to be managed. I know that. In 9 years, you have never treated me like I needed to be managed. I know. His voice broke slightly on the last one. I was scared. And I called it love because that was easier than calling it what it actually was. What was it? He looked at me steadily. Cowardice. The word surprised me. Not because it was wrong. Because he found it himself. Didn't wait for me to hand it to him. Is there anything else? He hesitated. 1 second. 1 second too long. Rowan. The night Emerson first called me daddy. I waited. It wasn't gradual. It wasn't a game she was playing. He sat back down. Like this part required less height. It was the night Ava told her. Told her what? That her father wasn't coming home. His voice dropped to something quieter. Ever. The morning felt colder suddenly. She had been waiting for the right moment for months, he said. There's no right moment for something like that. She just finally told her. And you were there. I was walking to my car. I heard her crying from their porch. He stopped. Not regular crying. I knew what he meant. I had heard that sound before. In uniform. From people who got news from home. The kind of crying that sounds like something structural giving way. I sat with her, he said. On their steps. For almost an hour. I didn't say much. Just stayed. And she asked you something. He looked at me. She said, "Are you going to leave too?" My throat tightened. What did you tell her? I told her I lived next door. A sad, almost smile. She thought about that very seriously. Then she said, "That's close enough." And she put her head on my arm. Silence. The daddy thing started a few weeks later, he said. Just appeared one day. We both corrected her. She understood I wasn't her father. He looked at his hands. She just also decided it didn't change anything. I looked at the door she had disappeared through. At the blue crayon she had left on the porch railing. Worn down to half its size. I'm saving the blue for you. Daddy Rowan said blue is your favorite. I pressed my lips together. I need some time, I said. Okay. I'm not leaving. I just need to think. Okay. I started toward the door. Then stopped. Rowan. He looked up. No more protecting me from things. His jaw tightened with something between shame and relief. No more, he said. Inside, the house was exactly as I had left it. Our photographs. Our furniture. The plant by the window I had been certain would be dead. It wasn't. Someone had been watering it. I stood in the kitchen for a moment. On the counter was a drawing. Child's handwriting underneath it in large, uneven letters. My family. I picked it up. A house. A woman and a little girl. A man next door. And in the corner, a figure in a navy uniform. Standing slightly apart from the group. But inside the drawing. Still included. I stared at that figure for a long time. Then I put the drawing down carefully. Face up. And stood there in my kitchen in my uniform with 8,000 miles of ocean still somewhere in my bones. And let myself feel all of it. The hurt. The confusion. The strange, inconvenient, impossible to ignore feeling of understanding exactly why he did it. Both things at once. That was the part nobody told you about marriage. Sometimes both things were true at the same time. He was wrong. And I understood. I met her properly 2 days later. Not with armor on. Just two women at a kitchen table with coffee neither of us remembered to drink. She was quieter than I expected. More tired. The kind of tired that lives behind the eyes and doesn't go away with sleep. I owe you an apology, she said before I could speak. You don't, I do. She looked at me directly. I let your husband carry something that was mine. And I let him keep it from you because it was easier for me. I looked at her. Were you afraid of me? She smiled slightly. Terrified. Why? She wrapped both hands around her mug. Because you were the person who could take away the only stability my daughter had found since her father died. A pause. That was selfish. I know that. It was honest, I said. She looked up. Honesty and selfishness aren't always different things. She laughed. Just once. Quietly. But something in the room changed after it. He never stopped talking about you, she said. Rowan? Every week. Something you said. Something you did. She looked at her mug. Emerson knows you love the stars because he told her once when she was scared of the dark. I stared at her. He said his wife looks at the same stars from the ocean. She met my eyes. He said that's how they stay close. I looked away. Because that was something Rowan had told me. At 3 a.m. on a video call when I was exhausted and homesick and doing everything I could not to show either. He had taken that and given it to a scared little girl. Used it like a nightlight. I pressed my lips together. He's a good man, Ava said quietly. I know. He never, I know, I said. And I meant it. Not because I was choosing to believe it without evidence. Because I had spent 2 days looking for the lie and couldn't find it. The truth was both simpler and harder than betrayal. My husband was a good man who had made a bad decision. Not from selfishness. From a love that protected when it should have trusted. Those were different things. And one of them I could work with. Before I left, Emerson appeared in the doorway. She was holding a piece of paper. She looked at me with the serious expression of someone delivering something important. "I made this for you," she said. She held it out. I took it. A drawing. A woman in a navy uniform. Stick arms. Careful eyes. And underneath, in large letters that took up half the page, "The Navy Lady Who Comes Home." I looked at her. "How did you know I came home?" She looked at me like this was a strange question. "Because Daddy Rowan smiled again," she said simply. Then she turned and walked back down the hallway. I stood there holding the drawing. Ava was very quiet beside me. "She notices everything," I said. "Everything," Ava agreed. The first one came that evening. No return address. My name on the front in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside, one photograph. Rowan and Ava outside a grocery store. She was holding bags. He was carrying a small backpack with a cartoon bear on it. They were both looking at something outside the frame. Both slightly smiling. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing secret. Just two people running an errand. Except someone had waited. Had watched. Had chosen this specific moment because of what it could be made to look like. Underneath the photo, in red pen, "Ask your husband how many times this happened while you were protecting your country." I stood by the mailbox for a long moment. Evening settling around me. Then I walked inside and put it on the counter in front of Rowan without saying anything. He looked at it. Looked at me. "Someone is watching," I said. "Yes." "You know who?" Not a question. "Derek Sutton," he said. "Ava's brother-in-law. Her husband's brother." "Tell me." He sat down. "After Marcus died, Derek positioned himself as the person Ava should depend on. The decision maker. The one who knew best." He looked at the photo. But Ava didn't want to be managed. She wanted to rebuild on her own terms. And when you helped her instead, he felt replaced. Rowan's jaw tightened. Not because he loved her. Because he needed to be needed. I thought about that. About the difference between those two things. "Why didn't you tell me about him?" He looked at me. "Because telling you about Derek meant telling you everything else first. And you weren't ready." I was afraid. I sat across from him. "I understand that," I said. He looked surprised. "It doesn't make it right," I added. "But I understand it." The second envelope came 2 days later. 3 lines. "You think you know what happened in that house? You don't. Ask him about the night the little girl cried for 3 hours and who she called for." I handed it to Rowan. He read it. Set it down. "She had a nightmare," he said. "Ava was on a night shift. The sitter canceled. Ava called me panicking. So you went?" "Yes." "Stayed until Emerson fell asleep. Came straight home." I looked at the letter. At the careful architecture of it. True details. Rearranged to suggest something false. "He's good at this," I said quietly. "Yes." "Taking real things and making them look like lies." "Yes." I stacked the second envelope on top of the first. "He's going to keep going. Unless we do something." I looked at Rowan. "I'll handle it." He looked at me carefully. "Alina," I said, "I'll handle it." Nobody told Emerson what was happening. They never did. Grown UPS thought that was kindness. Emerson had learned it was just a different kind of alone. She was sitting on the kitchen floor. Not at the table. The floor. Because the floor was closer to everything. You could feel the front door opening from 3 rooms away. Just a small vibration. Through the wood. Through the soles of your feet. Emerson had started noticing things like that. After the day Mama sat her down and said words that didn't make sense. "Daddy isn't coming home." She had waited for the rest of the sentence. There wasn't one. She had 7 crayons left. The box had started with 24. She didn't know where the others went. Things disappeared sometimes. She had stopped asking where. The blue one was the most worn down. Not because blue was her favorite color. Because it was the one she trusted most. The one that had made the most things. Today she was drawing a house. She always drew houses. Mama had asked her once why she never drew something else. Emerson had thought about it very seriously. Because houses stay. Mama had gone quiet in the way grown-ups went quiet when you said something true by accident. The house today had 4 windows. A door in the middle. A tree on the left with branches like hands reaching up. Now she was working on the people. People were harder than houses. Houses didn't have faces. Faces were the hardest part. If you got the eyes wrong, the whole person looked like someone else. She drew Mama first. Long hair. Small hands. A smile she made slightly too big on purpose. Because she wanted to remember it that way. Next to Mama, she left a space. Held the blue crayon above it for a long time. There used to be someone there. Tall. Loud laugh. Hands that could pick her up and make her feel like flying. She remembered the feeling more than the face now. That scared her sometimes. The feeling staying while the face got harder to see. She pressed the crayon to the paper. Drew the body slowly. The arms. Then stopped. Held the crayon above where the face should be. Very still. From the other room, she could hear the Navy lady's voice. She didn't know her name yet. But Daddy Rowan had talked about her so many times she felt like she already knew her. My wife looks at the same stars from the ocean. That's how we stay close. Emerson had gone outside that night and looked up. She had checked. They were the same stars. She had felt better after that. She didn't know exactly why. She looked at the space on the paper. Slowly. Carefully. She drew a circle. 2 eyes. A nose. A smile. Not too big. Not too small. The way she remembered it on good days. When she tried very hard. She put the blue crayon down. Looked at what she had made. Then she picked up the crayon again. And in the corner of the page, very small, careful, she drew another figure. This one in a Navy uniform. Standing a little apart. But on the same page. Still there. She looked at it for a moment. Then nodded. Like something had been decided. He came on a Thursday evening. I opened the door before Rowan could. I had been waiting. Not impatiently. The way you wait when you've already decided what you're going to do and you're just giving the other person time to arrive. Derek Sutton was tall. Well-dressed. The kind of man who believed appearance and credibility were the same thing. He looked at me with something between surprise and satisfaction. Like he had expected Rowan and found my presence useful in a way he was already calculating. Alina Mercer, he said. Not a question. A statement. Like he was establishing ownership of the conversation before it began. Derek Sutton, I replied. That landed differently than he expected. He recovered. I think there are things you deserve to know. About your husband. I agree, I said. I've spent the last week learning them. A flicker of recalculation behind his eyes. Then I know he helped a widow and her daughter when they had nowhere safe to go. I kept my voice completely even. Not cold. Even. I know he drove a 4-year-old to preschool when her mother was working back-to-back shifts. I know he sat on a porch step for an hour with a little girl who had just learned her father was never coming home. Derek's prepared smile had stopped working. I also know, I continued, that you've been sending photographs to my house. That you filed a custody claim built entirely on accusations. That you've been contacting my husband's workplace. He straightened. I was protecting, you were controlling, I said. Quietly. I didn't need volume. Ava doesn't belong to you because your brother loved her. Emerson isn't a bargaining piece because you're grieving. I looked at him steadily. I understand you lost your brother. I understand what that kind of loss can do to a person. Something shifted in his face. The prepared anger fell away. And underneath it was something much older. Much rawer. Grief. Just grief. Doing what grief does when no one teaches it where to go. But what you've been doing to this family has to stop. He said nothing. For a long moment he just stood there. A man who had come ready for a fight. Standing in front of someone who hadn't given him one. Rowan appeared behind me. Didn't push forward. Just stood there. Present. Derek looked between us. Then down. I just didn't want her to forget him. His voice was different now. Small. Marcus. He swallowed. I was afraid that if she moved on. If Emerson had someone new to call, he stopped. Couldn't find the end of it. I looked at him for a moment. Nobody is forgetting Marcus, I said. He looked up. Emerson draws pictures of her family, and there's always a figure that isn't any of us. I paused. Ava told me she talks about her father every single day. Rowan told her once that her father was a hero. She still repeats it. Derek's eyes filled. He looked away. The way men do when they've decided not to cry. She's not replacing him, I said. She's learning that love doesn't have a limit. The street was quiet around us. A long silence. Derek cleared his throat. I'll withdraw the custody filing. I think that's right. He nodded once. Looked at Rowan briefly. Something passed between them. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a door that wasn't all the way closed. He walked to his car. Drove away. Rowan stood beside me. You didn't tell me you were going to do that. I didn't know until I was doing it. A pause. How did you know about Marcus? Ava mentioned his name once. I watched the empty street. Grief makes people do terrible things. Doesn't make the things less terrible, but it makes them more understandable. Rowan was quiet. Then you would have been a good commanding officer. I am a good commanding officer. He laughed. Just once. The most normal sound I had heard since coming home. That night I took the velvet box out of my backpack. I sat on the edge of our bed. Held it for a moment. Then Rowan came in and stopped when he saw me. What's that? Sit down. He sat. I held the box out. He opened it slowly. Looked at the small silver charm inside. Looked at me. Back at the charm. Alina. 3 weeks before I came home, I said. The doctor confirmed it. He looked up. You've been carrying this the whole time. I wanted to tell you in person. Since before you landed. Since before I landed. He looked at the charm again. Then at me. Then he laughed. And cried. At the exact same time. Exactly like I knew he would. I leaned my head against his shoulder. Outside the window, the neighborhood was settling into night. Next door, a light was on. Somewhere in there, a little girl was probably asleep. Maybe dreaming of her father. Maybe dreaming of houses that stay. Maybe dreaming of navy ladies and blue crayons and stars that are the same from everywhere. We're going to be okay, I said. Not because everything was fixed. Because we were finally facing the same direction. Yeah, Rowan said quietly. His hand found mine. We are. Some homecomings happen at the door. Some happen much later. In a kitchen. On a porch step. In the middle of a hard conversation you almost didn't have. Mine happened on the edge of a bed. With a velvet box. And my husband crying and laughing at the same time. That was when I came home. Really home. Not to a place. To us.